all of you who have come together today, and all those of you who have had a hand in organizing it and publicizing it and making it happen. It's a beautiful example of community at work and different gifts in the community working together. So thank you. And as Pat said, I like your expression. I hadn't picked that up before, zooming around the world. It's quite true. I've been zooming around the world in a different way through Zoom rather than on planes for the last 3 months or more. And it's taught me a lot, and I'd like to share with you something of that, what it has taught me and is teaching me. First of all, I have to say, I'm very conscious that for us here at Bonvo, there were about 12 of us in the community for this 3 months of confinement, that for us, it was a very beautiful prison to be in, because we have a large amount of grounds that we can walk in and work on and enjoy. And the weather it was spring type weather, so we were fortunate with the weather. And also, they were very nice prisoners to be with. I've been in many prisons, and they're often, well, they're never nice places, and very often your fellow prisoners are rather dangerous people to be with. But here, it was a wonderful group of different ages, working, praying, living together, quietly and yet supportively. And it was, I think, for the core community here, the permanent members, it's been a time of deepening. And I think that's true of many of you, I'm sure. And I'd like to hear some of your responses as well. But I think as a community, it was an opportunity for us to go deeper, to enjoy that rhythm of life, which is at the core of our life here. The day that is constructed around the times of meditation, 2 meditation periods in the morning, 1 at midday, 1 in the evening, and the meals follow the meditation times. So there's a basic natural rhythm of prayer and eating and sharing and work in between. And we decided to do a spring clean, a little late in the spring, but we decided to do a spring clean of Bonvo and tidy up the grounds around and do planting. And so we were loving the place that has been so kind to us. So although it has been in many ways a peaceful time, we're very conscious that for many people and in many parts of the world, it's been a time of great disruption and suffering, of loss, of death, of grieving, and of mental disturbance with the loneliness and the restlessness and the claustrophobia that many people have felt. So we're very conscious of that. And so although it's been a peaceful time here at Bonvo, it's been a very busy time. And we realized that we were called to share the peace of this place, this sacred place, which was a place of contemplation for 1,000 years. And when the monastery was first made here, built here, nearly 1,000 years ago. And also the peace of the rhythm of the life that we're living. That we see Bonvo as a center of peace, but also a center for peace. And one of the silver linings in this crisis for us has been to understand exactly why Bonvo is here. Some of you have visited here, and I think you've been touched by that special spirit of place and that special feeling an atmosphere that you find here in this beautiful valley. Bonvo means good valley or beautiful valley. And but it became very clear to me in these last few months why the Spirit led us here to make this center, this home for the world community, and what its purpose is for the world as well, not only for the community. And very clearly, we are entering a time of great turbulence, of great uncertainty, a time of fear, because whenever we don't know what's going to happen, we begin to fear the worst. And there are very serious problems and crises and emergencies that the world is facing. One of them, some of them come directly out of this pandemic, the financial crisis that is affecting us globally, the global economy. And there's no easy answer to that. But of course, behind everything, behind all the social, the political problems, I think we see in many countries the growth of a totalitarian mentality, where governments that have assumed a lot of power, suspending civil liberties, for example, during the pandemic, are reluctant to let go of that power. Once you have power, it's not easy to let go of. So there are many serious problems that we have to face. And at the end of the John Main seminar in Belgium 2 years ago, somebody asked Charles Taylor, the philosopher and a meditator, are you optimistic about the future? And he was quiet for a long time. And then we were all getting a bit anxious to see what this great mind, this great man was going to say. And his reply has stayed with me ever since. There is a pessimism of the intellect, but there is also an optimism of the will. And what I take that to mean is that we have to look at the dangers, at the possibility of the worst. We can't just bury our head in the sands and think that it will go away. We have to look at it in the eye, face the troubles and the challenges that we are confronted with, and see just how serious they are. And some of the questions that I've received for today touch on that very issue. And so I'll come back to that. But there's also a responsibility, I think, in us to have an optimism of the will. And the great question is, how do we find this optimism, this hope, if you like? And I'd like to come back to that also, especially during the question period. So this has been one of the silver linings, I think, strangely. It's given a sense that we can face the future realistically and optimistically, if we draw on this gift of hope from a deeper place within ourselves. And so one of the gifts of this time for me personally has been to see why Bonvo is here. And also it's been a real joy as I zoomed around the world, sitting at my desk here. We set up the new website, A Contemplative Path Through the Crisis. We worked very hard and set it up in a very short space of time. And it's been still receiving a lot of support, a lot of interest, a lot of involvement. If you haven't visited it, I hope you can. A Contemplative Path Through the Crisis. And it's been a gift to me to see how many people relate to Bonvo as a physical and a spiritual center during this time of crisis. And even though they haven't been here, they know that it's here, and they know that there are a group of meditators like themselves living a peaceful, rhythmic life here. And of course, we're not saints, we're not angels, we're ordinary people. We have our ups and downs, we have our good days and bad days, and days where you just you know, feel it's not going to work, feels days when you're down. But overall, I think the rhythm of the life and the support of the meditation and of each other in community has enabled us to share the peace of Bonvo with many, many meditators around the world. And it's really good for us, for me, to feel that we are part of their lives as they are really part of ours. And throughout the 3 months, I think, we've been transmitting Mass on Sundays, a contemplative Mass at 12 o'clock French time. And we've had hundreds of people, both on the Zoom and on the YouTube link, participating in it and staying with us the whole time. It's a slow Mass. We reflect on the scriptures. We're not in a rush, and we meditate after communion, as we do on retreat, for example. And it's been wonderful to see the steady growth of that online Eucharistic community. So just understanding why Bonvo has come into being, what the Spirit was doing by bringing us here, that has certainly been a gift of this time. I think I could also say that our priorities are clearer. You know, when you're knocked sideways and one day you're making plans and the next day you realize that those plans are useless, your priorities come into focus eventually. You begin to see what are the really important things that you should be focusing on and faithful to, not just in your head, not just theoretically, but in practice. And I think I've seen that many people have discovered the priority of the times of meditation, their spiritual life, and that getting through a time of crisis like this without a spiritual path is really difficult, if not impossible. So many people have found the priority of having a spiritual path. And those people who've been meditating already, but maybe not very regularly or not finding the time for it, have come to realize that these times of meditation each day are the most important times of the day. That's something that John Main says in his teachings. And I know when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's asking us to believe a lot. The times of meditation are the most important times of the day. Well, I think many people have understood what that means during this time of confinement. Because how do we deal with the rest of the day without the clarity and the peace and the inner joy that we can find within ourselves through those times of meditation? I think also for many people who have been confined with their families, it's been a time of understanding how precious family life and our intimate relationships can be. I realize that it can go the other way. Tensions or frictions or difficulties in relationships can become inflamed and made worse when you're locked up together. But many people I've spoken to, young families especially, have said to me that just the time they've been able to be together, helping the children to study, playing with the children, this has been a grace that they will always remember. But even if you're living in a family, or living with someone, or living with others, during a time like this, you discover solitude. Solitude can often be destroyed by loneliness. Solitude is a necessary element of a healthy human psyche, a healthy human being. Solitude is not about being alone or being on your own. It's about seeing and accepting your own uniqueness, discovering the wonder of your own being, as it says in the Psalms. And the wonder of your being and my being is that it is unique. Everything that God has created, like every snowflake or every crystal, is unique. And so that is solitude, to see, feel, and accept that uniqueness and not be frightened by it. And often in our very busy crowd mentality, rushing to the shopping malls, jumping on bandwagons, being dedicated followers of fashion, if you remember the Beatles song. I think it was Beatles, was it? I think it was, anyway. In that modern consumer mentality, we throw away our solitude, our uniqueness. We just become like everybody else. But a time like this has forced us to understand what solitude means and why solitude, being ourselves and accepting the gift of our own being, that's what we do in meditation, accept the unique gift of our own being, that solitude is the basis of good, healthy, loving, and just human relationships. And loneliness, and there's a pandemic of loneliness in many cultures, many parts of the world today. What is loneliness? It's the feeling of isolation, of meaninglessness, of separation, of lacking intimacy, of lacking the warmth, of lacking the ability to give and receive love and attention between yourself and others. That's loneliness, and it's a terrible curse in the human condition. It's part of original sin. But loneliness is a kind of failed solitude. It's when we haven't yet been able to recognize and accept our own uniqueness. But as soon as we can begin to do that, meditation helps us to do that, then we begin to understand what relationship really means. So I think another practical silver lining of this crisis has been our relationship to technology. Before the crisis, we were always, at least many of us, I think, were very, very critical of social media, of the internet, and we could see, and our phones and our addiction to technology. We invented these wonderful tools, but these tools often became our masters and enslaved us. But I think during this time, we've been able to see what a gift technology is, how it can connect us. I was talking to someone in Italy yesterday, and Italians are very hugging kind of people. They see you, they hug you, they kiss you, they touch you, and he was, my person I was speaking to was telling me that's the thing he missed most, although he lived with his family, but what he missed most was that quality of warmth and being tactile and so on. Different cultures are different, obviously, but I think, so a Zoom meeting is not 100% the same as being with the person that you're talking to. However, there is a real spiritual connection, a real human connection. And by many of you, I know, have been meditating with others online, and I've been every day meditating with people online all over the world. And there is a true connection there. And it's mysterious. I think it's given me a sense of the spiritual potential of technology and of the internet in particular. And I'm thinking of one of the great Catholic theologians and thinkers of the last century, Teilhard de Chardin, a French Jesuit, who developed this idea of what he called the noosphere. And the noosphere was very similar to what we might think of as the internet, really. It's that sphere where we are in touch with each other around the world at the same time. And it's at the mental level, but it also opening us to spiritual communion. So that's exactly what we're doing now. We're part of this noosphere, being able to communicate, to listen, to be with each other, and in a few moments to meditate together. So I hope, you know, that we, having discovered this spiritual potential of technology, we won't forget it when, if whatever it means to go back to normal. One of the consequences of this for us in the world community is that we've initiated a restructuring of our whole digital presence, the different websites, the different web pages, and we're, I think, really being led by the Spirit to just think how we can improve that, synchronize it, and use it as a better tool for nourishing the community and also fulfilling our mission. And I think perhaps the great silver lining of this time of suffering and of disruption and of fear, the great gift that's come to us, all of us, although it hasn't been an easy gift to accept, is slowing down and learning to limit our desires, learning to accept and to be content with what we have. And sometimes, you know, when you sit down to meditate and your mind is racing and you've got things you've got to do, and you're thinking of all the unticked boxes of your to-do list, or the problems that you're trying to solve at that moment, it can take you quite a long time just for the mind to settle down. Maybe halfway through the meditation, or maybe in the last 2 minutes of the meditation. It takes time just for the mind to settle. But in this period, where life has been slower, it has been perhaps easier to come to the meditation with a quieter mind, maybe, of course, with anxieties and problems, but with a quieter mind. And we can really understand what Jesus means when he says, let go of your worrying, your anxiety at the time of prayer. And for me, certainly the basic essential elements of Jesus's teaching on prayer have become very real, even more real to me in these last few months. To go into your inner room and realizing that we can stay in that inner room even when after the meditation we get back to ordinary life. When he tells us to not be bombarding God with requests and news bulletins and telling God what God already knows, but trusting in silence that God knows us, loves us for who we are, does not judge us. God does not look at us and think, what a terrible, disgusting sinner. what a failure, what a bad Christian. God doesn't look at us like that. That's how we may look at ourselves. We see our faults. But God sees us as a reflection of himself, as an image of God. And if God wants one thing, it's that we should know that for ourselves by trusting his love for us. And then, as I said, he tells us to have a calm mind when we come to prayer, not just be filling our minds with our needs and our anxieties. He tells us to pay attention. That's the great gift of the mantra, is that it trains us in the art of attention, which is the art of prayer. And the art of prayer is the great human art. It's the great human gift to be able to pray. And this art of prayer can be used or can be developed infinitely until it brings us into complete union with God. So these times of confinement and of anxiety and of grief for how much suffering has happened in the world, this time has certainly had a grace, a powerful grace. But like all grace, we have to accept it. And the challenge for us now is, how do we go forward? Do we go forward into building a better world, a different world? Will our lifestyle be different as we get back to normal, whatever that means? Are we going to be truly contemplatives in the world that is picking up speed again? Are we going to be people who have this vision of the indwelling Christ as the great power of unity and hope among humanity? That's our challenge now. There's no doubt there's been grace at work in this pandemic. For one thing, we've seen amazing generosity, amazing altruism. 500,000 people in the UK within 48 hours signed up as volunteers to help with the sick. 500,000 people in 48 hours. And there are innumerable stories of altruism, of solidarity, and of care and concern. And we're seeing it now in some of the other social movements, the Black Lives Matter awareness of the racism that is still very powerful in many parts of the world. So we're seeing a new kind of solidarity and immediacy. That's certainly part of the grace. Suffering can bring us together, but it can also divide us and make us selfish and manipulative and exploiting others. And that's the choice that is being given to the world today. And how we make the choice, or what side of that choice we go for, will depend, I think, on how many true contemplatives there are in the world. And that's what I think the Holy Spirit is doing, is bringing people like us together to support each other and to celebrate together this gift of contemplation, not only for ourselves, but for others.
Okay, question number 1. I have been a WCCM meditator for the past 10 years, have joyfully tasted the fruits of meditation and continuously being blessed by them all. However, I have discovered that this joyful opposing of disposition of mind to oppose wrongdoings and injustices of the people that I encounter in my daily life, in the church community as well as social community, has become inherent in me. I want to see things done lawfully, correct, with fairness and justice. I find it easier to let go of self-interest and self-centeredness than other-centeredness in their unjust and unlawful practices. Some of my Catholic friends think that I should let go and let live, and not make others hate me by my actions. Somehow I do not agree. How can I, as a Christian, allow such false, misleading, and unjust actions to thrive, especially when I know that it is wrong when encountered with my eyes of faith? My non-Christian friends say that I am a principled creature, but could it be the work of God to instill this bold spirit in me? The shape of Christian virtue resounds so much in me after listening to the talks by Sarah Blackara. So do I let go or meditate to let go?
Well, thank you for the question. It calls to mind for me the verse from the scriptures, tell the truth, speak the truth in love. And the great witness of that is Jesus himself. And Jesus did not court publicity like a politician would, or somebody who just wants to be popular. And there's too much of that in our world, in our leadership. People who are just wanting to remain in power or win the people's support by telling them non-truths or untruths, fake news. And we all know examples of that. So I think your experience of meditation quite naturally and necessarily has revealed the spirit of justice to you. The spirit of justice is in us all. It's part of our natural human response to events. You notice how children, young children, before they learn otherwise, have an innate sense of justice. If one child is being treated better than another, there's a sense of outrage or a sense of disappointment. So this spirit of justice is the spirit of God in us. And it demands balance, fairness, equality of love, and above all, telling the truth. And whenever we meet the opposite of those things, we should feel a resistance and we should feel uncomfortable. And there is even a kind of anger that is right for us to feel. The important thing is, how do we express that? Do we express it in anger, in violence, with a spirit of superiority, with condemnation? Or do we speak it truthfully but in love? And that's why we need a contemplative discipline, a self-control. Self-control is one of the fruits of meditation, one of the fruits of the spirit. We need this self-discipline to be able to express our outrage at injustice without increasing the injustice, without, for example, increasing the polarization, making people more divided, increasing the violence. You know, you look at demonstrators on the street sometimes, and you see two groups, both of them carrying placards, and they are just facing each other without listening, of course, without the ability to listen, and just ready to collide and create more violence, more polarization. So the Christian understanding of that is that it is our job to tell the truth in love, even if we lose popularity ourselves, but to tell it in a way that doesn't intentionally increase the polarization. That's the art. It's difficult. And that's why we need the self-control to control our anger, maybe to wait until our anger has cooled a little bit. Sometimes anger gives you a kind of Dutch courage, or false courage, you know, to say things that maybe later you would regret. But if we can control the anger and yet keep that sense of burning justice, I think we are imitating Jesus himself as we see him in the Gospels. So I would just mention to you on our website, A Contemplative Path, in a couple of days you'll see an interview with Terry Doyle, who's a meditator from Middlesbrough in the north of England, who's been working for many years with the marginal people in society, asylum seekers, refugees, homeless people, drug addicts, prisoners. And he's a contemplative in action, and he has a burning sense of justice. And what's remarkable about him is his sense of humor and his hope. I mean, he often sees the worst of society and the worst of politicians and the worst of the various authorities. But he has hope and as well. I really encourage you to look at that in the next couple of days, because I think it shows us, it is the answer to this question, how we can be committed to justice while remaining balanced ourselves. And that's what justice is, balance, isn't it? So if we are unbalanced, we're just increasing the injustice.
Okay, next. Can we meditate for more than 30 minutes at a stretch? If not, why? The Buddhists, for example, meditate for an hour at a stretch, if not more.
Yes, well, we meditate, we recommend people to meditate for a minimum of 20 minutes. Some people find that is as much as they can do at the beginning, and then gradually build up to 30 minutes. Some people today, because of stress and anxiety, they can't do even 20 minutes. So I would say to them, meditate for however long you can, but stick to that time and gradually increase it. Now, why 30 minutes? Well, 30 minutes is a fairly universal recommended time for meditation practice, for pure prayer, as we call it. And the reason for that is, of course, you have to maintain a constant spirit of attention doing the work without getting lazy and drifting into a kind of a dozy state, or what John Main called the holy floating, the pax perniciosa. That's a very common and very dangerous state of mind to be in at prayer. And it is usually the result of just when we're tired, or we physically tired maybe, or meditation is work. And if we want to maintain a high level of productivity, to maintain a good standard of work, keep our attention sharp and clear and pure and faithful, as we say the mantra, it's probably better for us to take a shorter period. And if you want to meditate more, then have more periods of meditation. This is what we do at the school retreat. We had a beautiful school retreat in Penang last year. And those of you who have been on a school retreat, we call it a school of meditation retreat, will know that we have several periods of meditation, 8 periods during the day. But in between these periods of meditation, we will do a contemplative walk and have little breaks. Then you come back to the meditation fresher, and your mind is clearer and sharper again. That's the basic reason. Sometimes I think if you're on your own and you want to increase it, You could meditate for a little longer, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. If you feel that's comfortable. In fact, a couple of days ago, we meditated at a different time on Wednesdays here, because we called it a desert day. So I went down, I forgot it was Wednesday, and I went down, I was half an hour early. So in fact, I meditated for an hour. I mean, I knew I was doing it, but I meditated for an hour, and it was fine. I enjoyed it. But normally speaking, I would say try to keep it to 30 and increase and do an extra meditation at midday, or 2 in the morning with a break in between, something like that. Or if you really would like to, you can increase it to 40 minutes or so, but generally I would recommend that. St. Benedict says, pray, keep your prayer short but frequent.
Next, as most of our members are not very IT savvy, what do you suggest we can do to reach out to them during this prolonged lockdown?
Well, there are other ways of communication apart from the internet. I mean, there's the phone. If they have a smartphone, or maybe their children or grandchildren could help them to set up WhatsApp and WhatsApp app on their phone, and that's relatively easy even for non-savvy people. And then they have it's cheap, and they have the visual image of the person they're speaking to, and they can also just have the WhatsApp messages. So these are little ways of keeping in touch. And I don't know what you're doing in Malaysia, but here and in other parts of the world, I think visitors have gone to see older people, their relatives, in their homes or wherever they're staying. They keep a social distance, but wave at them, and or leave something outside their door. Give them a little present, a little treat, send them a message. So if you think of what it's like when you're in hospital, and somebody just comes in for 5 minutes and brings you a bunch of flowers, it's a great gift and makes you feel better. So little signs that they're not forgotten, and if you can, something like the WhatsApp link is a way of even meditating together.
We're also trying to share same readings and meditate at the same time during the day together. A lot of people are finding that very useful, just knowing that people are meditating with them at the same time.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yes, thank you.
Next, after the resumption of our weekly prayer meetings in due course, is there a possibility of having virtual prayer meetings as well in future?
I think these will continue, yes. I think we've discovered the grace, the silver lining of this period has been how easy it is for us to get together in a small group or a large group, and there's a lot of convenience in that. You don't have to travel. I don't think it will replace the physical meeting, but when TV became popular, everybody apparently was predicting that it would be the end of movies. People wouldn't be going to the cinema anymore. Well, they still go to the cinema and they watch movies on TV. And then when ebooks came out, everybody said, "Oh, that's the end of real books," and of course it isn't. So technology often creates a hybrid. New technology creates a hybrid, and this is good. We can use different media, different ways of communicating and being together at different times as is appropriate. I think what will happen actually is that we will discover the real gift of coming together in person, physically. And we took that for granted, you know, and in our meetings and our gatherings, our reunions, we kind of took it for granted. And now we should be more aware of the gift and be more attentive to the gift of that physical presence.
Generally speaking, the concept and practice of quid pro quo today have generated a mere exchange or barter. In many young families, communities, societies, governments, corporations, personal and international relationships, the contemplative aspect is not factored in. Your views on this, please?
Well, I'm thinking a lot about this at the moment, and again, on our we have a small group of young meditators, leaders, teachers in our community who are running the Contemplative Path website. And I was talking with them at our regular editorial meeting the other day, precisely about this. And so I think we as a community should be articulating the contemplative response to the challenges we are going to face in the coming months and years. Now, it would be nice to think that leaders all over the world will have become more contemplative, but I'm not sure. Some of them definitely perhaps have been taught by this bitter experience, but many of them, and I think this is true of many in the business world, just want to get back as quickly as possible, if they can, to the way things were in the past. It looks as if that isn't going to be easy. And the fact that it's not going to be easy means that there will be conflict. Because I think it's quite natural to see a tension between those who say, that probably is people like us, those who say, we have learned something through this. We've learned what I was talking about a few minutes ago, about the priorities of life, about the value of slowing down, the value of being together, of being able to enjoy each other's company, of reducing our consumption. I mean, the governments now are telling everybody to go out and buy, to kickstart the economy. Well, okay, but we do need to buy and sell. But the speed and the frenetic pace at which we were doing that in the past created terrible structures of injustice. The world was getting richer, but the gap between the rich and the poor was getting bigger and bigger. Now, we should also say that many millions of people have been lifted out of poverty in the last 50 or 60 years. Nevertheless, the gap between the rich and the poor is a very dangerous and terrible scandal. Dangerous because it is the breeding ground of violence and populism. We can see the kind of political leaders that are elected in that situation, who are bringing us more and more into a totalitarian situation. So there will be a tension between those people who see that and want to make changes to recover the balance that we had lost before the pandemic, and those who say that's a lot of nonsense, a lot of hippie kind of talk. We've got to get back as quickly as possible, you know, to our high level of consumption, regardless of what the environment is suffering, or regardless of how the most vulnerable people are suffering. And it is always the most vulnerable who suffer most. So I think we're going to be facing a lot of tension and conflict in that choice, and we really need contemplative people, men and women, young and old, who are raising the consciousness of society. So we keep that clarity. And what is it? It's simply the message of the gospel, the kingdom of God. It's simply, it isn't that we create the kingdom of God on earth, but that what we are doing on earth is being done in order to realize, to make the kingdom of God happen or bring it closer. And that's the vision of clarity, I mean. And we need to be contemplatives, and we need to be people who act in a just and peaceful way.
The next two are linked. How do I overcome numbness of my hands and feet when keeping still? And how to prevent itchiness when meditating?
Well, I think the numbness, maybe at the beginning, is something to do with circulation. It may be to do with posture, the way you're sitting. So pay attention to how you're sitting on a chair, or whether you're using a cushion, if you're sitting on the ground. Just look at how you're sitting and make sure you're not cutting off your circulation. If it's a circulation problem, then maybe a little exercise, stretching before the meditation, or maybe having some massage, if you can, a couple of times a week or something like that, to improve your circulation. But probably your posture is the most important. And the itchiness, well, it depends why you're itchy. But I think one simple way is wear loose clothing, or ideally no clothing. But it would have to depend whether you have your video camera on or not. But generally, loose clothing and light clothing, that might help as well.
Reality has been real. It has been there from the beginning, but its previously gentler approach allowed us to avoid looking at it squarely and steadily in the face. We have been focusing on illusions served up to us, some more pleasing and deceptive than others. Now our reality has been shaken by the current situation. It happened so suddenly, leaving us defenseless. This challenge of reality makes me ask, who are we as human beings? What are we doing in the world? What is the meaning of life? Why is there suffering and death?
Well, these are, if you're asking these questions as a result of this this crisis and shutdown, yes, I think it has been a worthwhile experience for you. These are the questions that really matter, and the questions that shape our values. And these are the questions that make us act in a certain way, in a loving way, rather than in a self-centered way. It's true, this pandemic hit us very suddenly. And it showed us how vulnerable modern technological culture is. We're not as mighty as we thought, you know. Look what's happened to the airline industry overnight. You know, in a few weeks, the world has been brought into the greatest recession on record. So we are very vulnerable for all our illusions of strength. One of the graces of this is to also to make us realize that we are interdependent, and let us hope that it will reduce the level of competitiveness and division that has made our economic and social system so extreme and so disruptive in the past. Who are we as human beings? If we truly listen to that question, I think the answer that emerges, it's not so much an answer as an awareness, a self-awareness, is that we are manifestations of the divine. every one of us is a unique self-expression of the divine. And just as you, those of you who have children, and those of you who have friends, and all of us who have people we love, just as you naturally love those you love, so God loves us. Because we are himself. One of the mystics said, God can only love himself. So God loves us in himself. So to glimpse that creates a world of justice, a world of compassion and tenderness, and of respect for the most vulnerable, for the young, for the old, for the dying, for the marginal. One of the things I was thinking when I was talking with Terry Doyle yesterday, the social activist or social worker from the north of England, is that we always think that the center of reality is, you know, where your president lives, where your prime minister lives, where the CEO has his office, you know, where the centers of power and influence and wealth and power. But that is, as Jesus points out to us, usually not true. And we're more likely to find the center of reality in the margins. Just as in ourselves, we find God not in our self-satisfaction and in our pride, but in our weakness and in our need, in our suffering. It's a hard lesson, but I think this time that we're living through is teaching us this lesson. And what are we doing in the world? Well, we're learning to love. And of course, if we have not been loved early in our life, that is more difficult, but not impossible. And meditation, if we can learn to meditate, will teach us from the deepest place in ourselves that we are lovable and we are loved. And we may resist that, and it may not be easy for us to accept it, but we will learn that. And then once we have learned that we are loved, we can begin to learn to love others to the best of our ability. And that's all I think we're really here to do. Using the gifts we have, accepting the handicaps we have, being who we are, but we're learning this amazing gift of loving, which is what God does. We're learning to be one with God, who is teaching us how to love. And meditation, never forget, meditation is the work of love. You are diving into it, you're immersing yourself in this ocean of love when you meditate. And again, I know we don't always feel that, but that is what we are doing. And the more we immerse ourselves in it, the more the handicaps and the resistance and the oppositions within ourselves begin to dissolve. What is the meaning of life? Well, that was the question that Julian of Norwich, the 14th century English mystic, asked. What is the meaning of it all? What's the meaning of the world? And she had a series of questions that she saw the answer to. She saw the meaning. And the question was, why did God create the world? Love was the answer. And how does God keep everything going? Love was the answer. And then she said, what is God's meaning? And the answer was love. And that is a profound Christian insight into the meaning of life. St. Augustine said, love and do what you like. All we are basically here to do is to learn to love. And then finally the question was, why is there suffering and death? Well, give me a little bit longer to answer that question. But I think you could say this, and this is something that our own human experience of life and also our experience in the last few months, I'm sure, has taught many of us. Grace and the silver lining often come to us in suffering. These are hard lessons to learn when we find ourselves suffering or losing what we love. And yet, it's how we respond to it that matters. One part of us, the ego part of us, will resist it and say, why me? And why, God, did you let this happen? You're supposed to be a loving God, and why are you treating me like this? I'm a pretty good person. I don't deserve this. So one part of us, the little childish ego part of us, will say that. But the deeper part of us will know that we are learning something through this suffering. And it may be that this is the only way we can learn it. Now, to balance that, there is joy and bliss and beauty and happiness. What we have to learn, meditation gives us the balance to learn this, is that God does not reward and punish. He does not reward us for being good by giving us nice things that we want, and he doesn't punish us for being bad by making us suffer or taking away what we love. That's not how it works. But what we can say, and it's something we cannot really explain, but we can know if we enter into it and accept it, is that God is loving us and teaching us and shaping us and bringing us closer to himself, both in the times of happiness and fulfillment and joy, and in those times of suffering and loss and deprivation. And look at the way Jesus entered into his passion. And we will see how we can learn, with his help, how we can learn to accept suffering and death as part of our education, part of our formation.
Finally, how does one overcome long-standing hate and anger? A hatred so old and impossible to let go, let alone forgive. Can one live in peace in spite of such hatred? That is, to accept that this hatred cannot be let go and to continue to coexist with it?
Well, I think we cannot be at peace and hate. That's impossible. And we're fooling ourselves if we think we can. So we can ask this question. If I hate someone, if I refuse to forgive, who is really suffering, me or them? The answer is me. Therefore, out of self-interest, if nothing else, you should learn, we should always learn to let go of the hatred, the anger. And what are we letting go of? We're letting go of pain. We're letting go of pain that seems to perpetuate itself because we can't let go of it. And what it is, it's the pain of hurt. We have been hurt. And if you are hurt, then you react. You react maybe by being violent, being angry, being hateful towards the source or the person that caused you this hurt. And therefore, forgiveness is the only way. But forgiveness doesn't mean to say, oh, it doesn't matter, or I forgive you. That's not what forgiveness is. I don't think forgiveness is, I forgive you. Forgiveness is when you say, I can try to understand why you hurt me. I can't fully understand it because I still hurt a lot. But I will try to understand the pain you might have been in to act in this way that hurt me so much. That's the beginning of forgiveness. And we have to keep, that's what it means to love your enemies. It means to give them your attention and try to understand why they did what they did. Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing. That's the key to forgiveness. So don't think that forgiveness is about you being on this superior moral ground and saying, I forgive you. It isn't like that at all. It's you accepting the pain and the hurt that you've suffered, and at the same time turning your attention. That means your love, because as meditation teaches us, attention is love. So turning your attention to the person or the source of that hurt. And then little by little, there's a healing takes place. And the spirit of love comes in, and that's how you regain your peace. You don't just regain it, you grow. You become a deeper, wiser, more loving, more real person as a result. So never give up on that work of forgiveness, and get whatever help you need to help you to do it. Go for that help. Talk about it with someone. Make sure that you don't bottle it up. Speak about it. Share it with someone you trust, and that will help you to start this process. Otherwise, you will be locked up unnecessarily in this terrible state of lovelessness and pain. And you don't need to be. We are released from that by love.
That concludes the questions. That remains for me to thank you very much, Father, for spending this time with us. It has been very enriching and given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much, Father.
It's been
Pat and Father, there's actually one question that was posted online. If you just can answer the quick one, this is the last one.
Okay.
The question is this: almost in my meditation, I always fall asleep and digress. Is this a sign that I have no gift in meditation? How do I face this one?
Well, I sympathize with it. I fall asleep sometimes myself. So maybe I've got no gift for meditation either. No, I think what it is a number of things. It's do you get enough sleep at night? Are you meditating at the right time of the day? Are you sitting in the right posture? Are you meditating before a meal rather than after a meal? So those kind of questions help. And then sometimes meditation is just relaxing. And so if you are a little tired or a little low, then the tendency will be to get drowsy. So your posture is the most important thing. But make sure you get enough, well, not only sleep, but also enough exercise. I think if you don't get enough exercise, you tend to get drowsy as well. So, but it's very human, and it's very universal. So don't worry about it. But and do look at some of those factors that I mentioned and see if you can improve them.
Okay, Pat? Yeah.
Yep.
It's been, let me just say, it's been a very delight to be with you. A very special affection, as you know, for the community in Malaysia, where I've been talking recently about Father John's life and journey, and as we all know, he began his journey of meditation in Malaysia, and it's wonderful to see. I'm sure he would be so happy. He'd be smiling at this moment, I'm sure, on the community of meditators in Malaysia that has grown up. So anyway, it's been a delight to be with you, and thank you for being such a wonderful community and such a precious part of the global family.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you again for being with us. And talking about Father John, actually, I met Mother Mangalam today, and I sent her the link. Yes, I sent her the link, but I don't know whether she was able to join us.
Okay.
She has not been very well, you know, and she now has to spend a lot of time in bed. But she's still okay. She's plodding on.
What age is she now?
She must be 94.
Because she's the same age as Father John.
Wow.
He would be 94 as well. Yeah. Amazing.